A collaboration between interior designers and architects seems like a match made in heaven, right? Well, today's guest, Gisela Schmoll, walks us through the nitty-gritty on creating those relationships and keeping them. Stay tuned. Hey kids, and welcome to Designed by Wingnut Social. I'm your host, Darla Powell. Today's guest, Gisela Schmoll, is an architect. Right? We haven't had an architect on the show in a hot minute. And Gisela talks to me in our conversation, which I guess is assumed if she talks to me, about collaborating with interior designers collaborating with architects in order to build your business in a successful way, reduce some liability maybe in there, right? So we have a very interesting conversation about the differences between being an architect and an interior designer and how the twain shall meet. All right. Before I get into my conversation with Gisela, you know the drill. Gisela Schmoll, a California licensed architect and industrial designer, is the luminary force behind Gisela Schmoll Architect PC. With a multifaceted career that spans new residential projects and remodels, product design, and the iconic Palm Pilot. She was a piece of that. Remember that? Palm Pilot? Gisela crafts spaces that redefine the boundaries of design. Rooted in collaboration, GSA, that's her firm, believes in the transformative power of good design, where the experience of being in a space becomes a profound journey. Wingnuts, help me in welcoming Gisela Schmoll to the show. Hey there, Gisela. Welcome to the show. How the hell are you?
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am excited to have you on the show. It's not often we have architects on the show because our biggest audience is the interior design piece. So I am very happy to pick your brain today if you're game.
Yes, it's my pleasure.
So Gisela, there's interior designers in the audience that makes up the bread and butter of our audience, but there are aspiring interior designers who maybe they're doing decorating or small projects and they want to level up. They want to partner with an architect. They want to start doing design build. And we're going to go down that road and maybe answer some questions to see what that could look like, some ways maybe to go, to not to go. But before we get into our conversation, just tell us a little bit about yourselves and your multiple personalities, yourself and your firm, and we'll dig in.
That's fair, calling it multiple personalities, because I've had multiple careers. Actually, just a brief going back in history, I was born in Austria, raised in Canada, and then I came to the U.S., to California, to go to undergrad at Art Center College of Design, where I studied industrial design. So I did that for about 15 years. And if you're old enough, you may remember the Palm Pilot. I was the industrial designer who did that. That's a fun little story. I was the most junior person in the office, and Palm Computing was a startup at that time. And so my understanding is they weren't actually paying us. They were giving us stock, my firm stock. So they assigned this project to the lowest paid employee, which was me. And that's how I got this job. And who knew it was going to sell over 1 million units and then eventually kind of spin off things like cell phones,
Wow. So I was going to ask you, I was going to kind of tongue in cheek ask you if they gave you a piece of that business, but they did.
Unfortunately, I would be filthy rich if
they didn't. Oh, okay.
No. My bosses, the firm, got some stock in Palm Computing, and I'm sure they did very well. But
I see.
I just got my salary, sadly, and very little credit.
I remember when they came out, I was a cop at the time, and instead of taking like little notes, we started to get those and take little notes with them. We were super cool. We were the coolest.
Yeah, actually, I should have brought one. I have one of the early mock-ups of that one.
That's awesome.
And then but then I went into industrial design to basically do housewares. That's what I was really interested. But I wound up in Silicon Valley, and I was doing tech, and I was so not interested in tech. So I was designing a lot of computers, PCs, basically. And then after doing that for about 15 years, I went to grad school and studied architecture, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years now. So,
wow, that's quite a departure. I mean, it's still creative and still design, but I mean, 3D spaces that we're living in is different from something that you hold in your hand to determine, your next act. What was the thinking behind that from going to architecture? Is that something you'd always been kind of interested in?
I should have done this when I was younger.
Okay.
There were times, there are a lot of sketches still of me doing floor plans when I was like 10 years old. So I just I got sidetracked. And this was a course correction. So I'm here where I want to be finally. It just took me a lot longer than most people.
That happens a lot where people are doing interior design or architecture. In your case, architecture, that's, you have to actually go to college and get, the education for that. But decorating, interior design as a second career, people are retiring from finance, marketing, and doing what they've loved all along. And the biggest common denominator is being children and redecorating your bedrooms. But I think you're the first guest that has actually come on and said they were drawing floor plans as a 10-year-old.
Yeah. So, I remember one in particular. I was drawing a circular house, which is very tricky, by the way, because you get all these pie rooms. Yeah. Not a great floor plan, but Frank Lloyd Wright did it a lot too, actually.
Yes, round houses like spheres or domes are very secure in hurricanes, and I'm from Florida, so I know. That was
structurally also in seismic land here, So.
That is very interesting. Okay, so in the green room, we were talking a little bit about, I thought this was an interesting tidbit for those of you who are in California. So Gisela Schmoll Architect is actually PC, is the name of your firm in California. And you told me the reasons for that is why.
It's a professional corporation. So if you are a licensed professional in California, you can become a professional corporation, which is like a regular incorporation, but you get these better protections as a professional, and you have to use your last name in the business name. And additionally, one thing I didn't mention during the green room, I also have to use the word architect or architecture in the name.
Well, I mean, it kind of works out for SEO purposes, right? Search engine optimization. If you're looking for an architect in your area, that part's solved. And if you're looking for Gisela, there you go.
Yeah, it's much easier now to find me than some random name.
100%. So something else we were kind of covering in the green room is we were talking about, and I'll just dive in there. So we have a lot of clients at Wingnut who are design build firms, right? Or we have interior designers who are aspiring to become design build firms. And that's not something I was exactly with my interior design firm. We did some remodeling and tore down walls, but I wouldn't say I was a design build firm. So this is not an area I'm that familiar with personally. So you being an architect and talking about, or speaking to, I should say, interior designers collaborating with architects for these larger projects, renovations, whole home builds and stuff. How is that different from interior designers who are pairing up with general contractors, or maybe their husband or wife is an engineer and they said, you know what, let's make this a design build firm. Are these two entirely separate animals, or where's the...
Totally different animal.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about those. Yeah.
And a design build firm, for one thing, you're taking on all the risk.
Okay.
So if you're also...
That's a lot.
If you're the designer and the GC, suddenly you're taking on so much more risk, and you're liable for anything that goes wrong for about, in California, 10 years. Each state is going to be different. Yeah. And honestly, to me, that's terrifying. So I wouldn't do it. But I know my old business partner went that route. And he was a structural engineer. But like for me, it's a little too risky, I'm in a really litigious profession. We are actually also interior designers are in a very litigious profession. And once you're also the GC, you have the most risk out of all the professionals involved. So you really need to know your stuff. And additionally, I feel like if you're a design build firm, the professional who started the firm, it's usually a GC or a design professional. And they're really good at their one silo, but they're often not that good at the other silo, which also increases your risk. So that's one of the things. I think it's a really difficult place to be. I think it's a very, very difficult place to be.
So if you're an interior designer aspiring to be a design build firm, what is the best way to go about that? Or are you saying maybe not
partner
do
with
that?
a GC? Definitely.
Okay.
I think the most successful design build firms are partnerships with a GC and an architect, or a GC and an engineer, or somebody who's got the design portion and someone who really has the construction knowledge. And then you can really collaborate well together to control costs. The way I work now is, I'm not a design build firm, I'm an architect, but
Sure.
in order to control costs, if I have a client who's very sensitive, and right now construction costs are crazy.
Yeah.
We could talk about what it is in San Francisco. It's crazy.
I can't even imagine. Yeah.
It's $1,000 a square foot for average. We're not talking high end. We're just talking run of the mill. Anyway, so with clients like that, I can do the design portion, and I know a lot about construction, but I'm not on the job site every day. I'm not doing the construction sequencing, and that's really important. So if a client really wants to control cost, I bring a GC on board on a time and material basis to do cost estimating along the way. So, and that way, I'm not a GC taking on all that risk. So that's the way I prefer to do it. But everybody's tolerance for risk is higher, and the rewards can be really great. So
so you did mention that there's higher liability, right, for design build firms, and if you're contract, you are taking on all that risk. So what is the level of responsibility and risk that you're taking on as an architect hiring a GC? I mean, you just said that California is 10 years. It's very litigious space that we're all in. Yeah. How does that remove your liability? I'm sure we have architects listening. So
I am still liable for my portion of the work, right?
Okay.
But since the builder is actually building, they have just so much more risk.
I see.
And so if I draw a detailed drawing, and let's say it's a roof detail, and the roof leaks down the road, and the GC built it to my detail, I'm definitely going to be on the hook for that. But I don't draw everything under the sun, so there's a lot of decisions that the GC has to make in the field, and I wasn't there. I'm not on the job site every single day. And so I'm not liable for those decisions. But typically the breakdown is, the GC, if the lawsuit happens, the GC is responsible for about 60%.
They're the brunt.
Yeah, they get it. And then everybody else gets pulled in, and gets a little piece of the pie. They tend to go after everyone. So, including interior designers.
100%. So that is something to consider for sure. So let's talk about partnering or getting together with interior designers in the way we can collaborate with architects. Who are the best candidates to start looking at perhaps picking up an architect such as yourself to collaborate or partner on a project like this if they don't want to be a whole, internal taking on that risk design build firm, or maybe there's room for both. I don't know.
Well, is the question at what point to bring in an architect?
Yeah. So who would be a good candidate? At what point? What level of work? When are we looking at partnering with an architect, and vice versa, I would imagine?
Yeah, I think anytime you're starting to think about moving walls around, that's the time to get an architect involved. And, oftentimes, if you're only, let's say, opening a wall between a kitchen and dining room, let's say, and it's not load bearing, no big deal. You probably don't need me, like hiring me in that circumstance is like using a cannon on a fly instead of a fly swatter, so that's not worth it. But when you're really starting to move more walls around, it's really important to have an architect on board and a structural engineer. I know a lot about structure, but I don't run the numbers. So I always hire a structural engineer also on my projects to do those numbers.
We just redid our kitchen and we didn't take out a load-bearing wall, so we didn't notify anybody.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and from the building department's standpoint, whether the wall is load-bearing or not, you still need to get a permit for that. So,
oh, maybe we did. Yeah, maybe I'm just misremembering. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about getting permits, right? So a lot of interior designers, like I said before, there's a lot of self-taught interior designers, right? Decorators, interior designers who might be going over their pay grade or taking on more than they can chew. So let's talk about permits and remodeling, and when they start getting these ideas of grandeur of really renovating a space, how far in the weeds can they get before they start to need to pull permits, and how do they know when that is?
If you're doing something simple like finishes, so for example, if we're replacing the cabinets in the kitchen, but really the layout stays pretty much the same. We're not doing any electrical, we're not doing any plumbing, we're replacing cabinets, we're painting, you probably don't need a permit for that. But the moment again you get into electrical, plumbing, and getting into the structure, the bone, the skeleton of the building, you need a permit. And now this might be different in different municipalities, but in California, the moment you start touching windows, you need to do an energy report. So there's some small projects that can be done without a permit. So in most municipalities, they have online, they list online the items that you can do without a permit. So in California, you can build a very small shed without power or plumbing in your backyard. I think it's 120 square feet and can't be higher than 8 feet. But basically, if you're changing a light bulb, you need a permit. Seriously. I'm only slightly joking, but so many people get into trouble because they think,
Is it worth it for the interior designer on the project to pull a permit? Are there any pros or cons to that?
Well, the thing is, the interior designer can't pull a permit. They can apply for the permit, but again,
it's the owner of the GC, right?
Yes, the owner of the GC, and maybe it's different in other states, but in California, it's only the owner of the GC. Now, I could pull the permit too if I got a letter from the owner of the GC, but I don't want to take that on. I don't want to stand in line in the building department. So, typically, I do the permit processing, and then right when it's ready to issue, the owner comes in. Partly because the GC has to certify that they're licensed. They also have to prove that they have workman's compensation and all this other stuff. So
I guess that would be a benefit of being a design build firm if you have a design GC collaboration, because if the GC is pulling the permit, even though you are taking on that risk, you are getting some protections from that, like for non-payment or that kind of thing, right?
That's true. Actually, you're touching on one of the differences between a architect versus an interior designer. If a client doesn't pay me, I can put a lien on their property.
Ooh.
And you cannot. I have never done this, happily. My clients are all very nice, but
and all very happy.
Yes. And it's a two-way street. That's another story. But, I have had a structural engineer do it, and he says it's really easy, 20 minutes at City Hall. So
that's kind of scary.
Yeah. So be nice to your architect.
Yeah. So there you go. There's a little bit of a trade-off in exchange for that extra risk you take right there.
And so can a contractor. And additionally, the subs can also pull a lien on a property. And if the one thing that many people don't understand is that the subcontractor usually gets paid by the general. And if the general doesn't pay the sub, even though the homeowner paid the general, the sub can still pull that lien.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So in commercial projects, on bigger projects, what winds up happening with savvy owners is that all the subs have to sign off at the end of the project saying that they've been fully paid up and they won't apply a lien to the project. I forget what the document's called, but in residential work, which is typically what I do, we don't do that. But yes.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. There you go. Let the buyer beware.
Yeah. So it's so important to hire a reputable contractor who's hiring reputable subs, right?
Yeah, for sure. All right, you guys know, or at least I hope you know, or if you don't, I'm not doing my job, that we do full service social media management for you guys, interior designers, architects, and to the trade vendors or furnishing manufacturers, etc. But we are excited to announce our very new hybrid plan with Wingnut Social. It's kind of a half done for you, half you do it yourself sweet spot. If you're a beginning designer or a firm who's just really kind of getting started in social media marketing, but don't quite have the marketing budget to delegate it to a marketing firm, because that's a pretty decent size investment, right? This is our hybrid solution, and it's perfect for busy designers who the power of consistent professional content on Instagram. You've heard guest after guest and client after client say how they're getting leads from Instagram, right? But you have that overwhelm. You have no idea what to post, when to post, what the hashtags and captions should look like for a value proposition, a mix in order to reach your ideal client. Well, ta-da! Introducing the hybrid plan with Wingnut Social. You get a monthly content calendar where we create the content for you and you post at your leisure on your own time with our guidance. We're doing the posts, we're doing feed posts, we're editing reels for you. You get 8 feed posts, 2 reels. We're writing the captions for you. We are researching the hashtags for you that drive engagement with guidance, best practices, and quarterly strategy sessions to make sure that your strategy and everything is in alignment with your business goals. So if you want to find out some more information on our amazing hybrid plan, it's been very popular so far. Head on over to wingnutsocial.com and hit up that Let's Chat button, and let's see how we can work together. Again, that's wingnutsocial.com. So you as an architect, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're focusing on the big picture, the bones, the structure, the function of the space, the electrical, how the house is going to work, but not so much on the finishes and the interior decorating piece.
Yeah,
am I wrong?
but remember, I'm an industrial designer too.
Okay.
So while I am not at all interested in selecting fixtures and finishes, it really depends on what interior designer I'm working with. So some interior designers do not draft, and some of them do. Mm-hmm. And when I am working with an interior designer that doesn't draft, that usually I'm doing the interior elevations, and then the two of us will sit down together and go through the interior elevations together and, redline it, and I'll modify it. Part of it is I'm also working in 3D, which is really great tool for a lot of homeowners who don't understand plans and elevations. So I've already got everything modeled, so it's easy for me to get into the interior elevations. So I will give the interior elevations to the designer, and then the designer will work with the homeowner to pick exactly what cabinet and exactly what countertop and paint and light fixtures. But usually there's a collaboration there. Now, I've worked with a few other interior designers who do their own interior elevations, and it's really important for us to talk about this in advance so that we're the homeowner's not paying for this service twice. That's happened before. And
you're on the same page.
Exactly.
And no one's stepping on anyone's toes, right?
Oh, yeah. And then, that happens a lot too. Toe stepping.
So where I was going with that question as well, so for those designers who maybe, design build firm, that sounds like too much of a thing. But you know what? I would love to collaborate with an architect and be their go-to interior designer and work with them on projects, or someone whose aspirations are to work on bigger projects like that. What is it that you as an architect look for in an interior designer to collaborate with? What chops should they have if they're going to reach out to their local designer in Miami, architect in Miami, and say, hey, I'd like to work with you? What kind of things, what should that approach be?
That's a hard one to answer because you don't really know what it's going to be like. It's the working relationship is the most important thing for me. And I feel the same way about my clients, is that we're in a long-term relationship. Even if it's a relatively small remodel, nothing happens fast in this industry. So we have to like each other and we have to play well together. And so and oftentimes it's hard to know until you're actually working with an interior designer whether it's a good fit. The first thing I look at is stylistically, are we a good fit? Are we also a good fit for the homeowner? I tend to be more modern. Sometimes my clients have more traditional taste, in which case I'll refer a totally different interior designer. And it's true, the people I refer are the people I work well with, who are good at collaborating. This is a big team. No one person puts the project together. And an interior designer, a good one, can make or break the project. They can add a lot of cost. Same is true for the architect, by the way. So we have to really play well together, and it's really hard to know until we're in a project together. A good portfolio is helpful. I just met with an interior designer actually last week, and she showed me her work. We talked a little bit about how we work with each other, how that would happen, and I think I'll refer her to clients.
Nice.
It was a good experience, and she's also very modern. So I know a lot of interior designers who are more transitional or traditional.
Sure.
So it was good to meet someone with kind of a very modern sensibility. But
yeah, so that's a very good networking opportunity, right? Not only for the interior designer, but for you as well.
Yeah,
because you're referring. She's using you for the bigger projects. You're using her to help finish out some of those projects as well. Would you consider hiring a self-taught designer? Are you looking for bona
most of them are.
Really?
Oh my goodness, so many of them are. One that I love, she used to be in insurance. And I'm like, okay, that's a real big change. So she's a non-drafter, but we work really well together. She's super organized. That's the other thing. I mean, a good interior designer has to be really organized.
Sure.
So she's great at spreadsheets because she's been in insurance. And, other ones came from another one I'm thinking about came from advertising. People come from all walks of life. Another one I'm working with that I really like, she was a lawyer. So
wow.
So she's very detail oriented. So yeah, everyone comes from different places. It's interesting.
That's good to know. I was a cop before I was a designer.
I know,
by the
you
way.
said that's so fascinating.
Isn't that crazy? That seems like another life. Well, that's very interesting to hear, because I know a lot of people who are very down on self-taught interior designers. Sometimes we like to eat our own, right? So I was curious to see if that would be a thing. So if you're a self-taught interior designer, you want to network with your local architect, it can be done. You just got to have it together.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think it's helpful to have some work experience at another design firm before you go out on your own. But yeah, same with contractors. A lot of them come from the art fields, at least in San Francisco. So, yeah.
What are some other benefits of collaborating with interior designers and vice versa that you have found that have helped, the big picture to be better than the sum of its parts? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, an interior designer can really make or break a project. They really can.
Yeah, I mean, speak more to that.
Yeah, well, for me, I'm thinking about the space. I'm really thinking a lot about lighting, the natural light, I mean, and how humans move through space. A good interior designer is doing that too, thinking a little more spatially. But the finishes, ay. And then same with the GC, that, it doesn't matter how great the interior designer and the architect are. If the execution of the finishes are bad, then the project is broken too. So selecting good finishes. And the other thing about interior design too, is one of the things I've seen with some interior designers is the trendiness factor. And one of the reasons I went into architecture is I wanted to design stuff that would last. And being an industrial designer, you're designing products that end up in landfill after a few years, and that's really depressing. I want this. When I went into this, I wanted to stay out of the landfill, design things that last. And same with finishes. I think, it makes me mad when a finish doesn't hold up, more than 5 years, right? And I think it's also irresponsible in this day and age with climate change being an issue to design for temporary stuff,
Right. How far along in your architectural design process, when you have your plans and your design and you're meeting with the client, are you when you bring an interior designer in, or is that something they're with you from the very beginning, or is that a phase?
Oh, that totally varies. Sometimes the interior designer and I come in together at the same time, in which case we'll be working together on the floor plans. Usually I'll be doing the floor plans, but again, we'll be sitting down redlining. Other times, the interior designer have come in later. And then on other projects, the budget isn't there to hire an interior designer. So in which case the homeowner is doing it and pulling me in occasionally for advice, but that's not my ideal scenario.
It's okay. Architects don't want to do that. You don't want to bait source furnishings and stuff,
No,
right?
not at all. Like, to me, it's like, oh, do you like this color or this color? No, I can't deal with that at all.
So it does sound like a marriage made in heaven. If you're an interior designer or an architect married to an interior designer, aside from the liability, do you think it would be a good idea for that dynamic to do?
Oh, I think that'd be great.
Design build firm. The liability has me scared and probably has a lot of people running.
Do you know Carol Whiting in Australia? She's an interior designer that I follow. She does beautiful work.
I don't think
check
so.
her out. She does gorgeous work. Gorgeous work. Her husband is an architect.
Okay.
It's a marriage made in heaven, and they do collaborate on some projects together. Okay. But yeah, beautiful work.
It was the liability thing that was like, don't be a design build firm. Don't do it.
Well, it's just because California is so litigious. It's just incredibly litigious here. It's like motorcyclists. They say, there's those that will and wait a second. Those that have fallen and those that will fall as a motorcyclist. Same with architects, general contractors, and interior designers in California. Sooner or later, it's going to get you.
Wow. Well, I have.
So be sure to have insurance.
I have employees that live out in California, and I know it's expensive and it's nuts out there for sure. Absolutely. So, Gisela, what are some other ways that we can collaborate with architects, and what does that look like before we get into the fire round?
Oh, one of the things that's really, really important is to get the fixtures and finish schedule together in a timely fashion.
Okay.
Ideally, it would be done at the start of construction, but I know how things go. Depending when we've hired the interior designer, that might linger. But definitely by the time framing's in place, that should be complete, because if it lingers much longer, it's going to add cost to the client, especially if things have to get changed during construction. And the other thing interior designers need to do, especially if they're one that came on a little bit later, is keep referring back to the architectural drawings, because the architectural drawings are what the contractor uses to build from. So, they're not running to the fixture finish schedule and going, "No, what toilet are we using here?" No, they're going to look at my drawings and they're going to plumb to that, right? I've had this happen before, where my drawing showed a floor-mounted toilet. We had a big bathroom, and so I was like, let's not waste money on a wall-mounted toilet. Not waste money, but it's more expensive.
Sure, yeah.
So I was like, let's do a floor-mounted toilet. We have plenty of space, which was unusual in San Francisco. And so that was fine. The contractor plumbs it for a floor-mounted toilet. The interior designer shows up and goes, "But my schedule shows a wall-mounted toilet." And I'm like, "But
oh." Yeah. So it was a miscommunication somewhere.
Oh, yeah. And like I don't have time to go through all the fixtures and finishes schedule either,
Who eats that? Who eats that cost? Is that the designer?
Homeowner eats it. And the homeowner ate that one, and they were not happy. The contractor was not happy. Everyone was not happy. That was bad.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised if that was a mistake that the homeowner would eat that. I would not be happy either. Yeah.
Yes.
Wall mount is a lot more expensive, especially if you're going to install one, because you have to do the wall. Yeah,
exactly. But space is tight. So especially in San Francisco, these are small little houses. So we do it a lot. But the other reason I don't do wall mounted, if I can avoid it, is based on something one of my structural engineers said. He's concerned about the structural stability over time of those wall mounted toilets, over 10 years time.
I would be too.
Well, and I'm concerned about servicing it. Something goes wrong. Yikes. Now you're opening up a whole wall.
Yeah. And depending on, what that outside wall looks like, that could be
exactly.
That could be a real
hopefully
mess.
It opens onto the master closet or primary closet. And we're not allowed to say that anymore. Primary closet, then no problem.
Yeah. Okay, I do have one more question for you before we get into the fire round. What is the biggest mistake that you see from interior designers who maybe don't know what they don't know from not collaborating with an architect that maybe in your experience or you've heard of? Yeah.
The biggest one is not hiring the architect and structural engineer. I mean, not being willing to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. Yeah. I think that's a common mistake for anyone new to a profession. I know I did it when I was a young architect. Well, I was never young when I started architecture, but when I was a newly minted architect, it's like you want to act like the professional, and so you are not good about saying, I need help.
Yeah, for sure. When I first started my interior design firm, I was tempted by that for sure. But we did some remodeling in Aventura, which is a really hoity-toity kind of place in Florida. And we did hire structural engineers and architects. And I would tell the client, say, listen, this is out of my pay grade. I could not tell you without consulting with this professional. So, which saved me a whole hell of a lot of headache.
Yeah. And, most architects, especially if you have a relationship with an architect, like there's several interior designers I work with regularly, and they'll just text me or send me a drawing and say, what do you think about this? Do I need a permit for this? Or what's the code relative to XYZ? And I'll tell them,
Oh, nice.
Yeah, no, because we're referring work to each other. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, I'll say definitely if you want to step up your game, I highly recommend collaborating with an architect such as Gisela. All right, now I have to ask you, Gisela Schmoll, are you ready for the What Up Wingnut round?
Those were hard questions.
We don't play around. Yeah. It's a serious show. Ready? Okay. What would the hashtag on your tombstone be?
Oh, that was the worst question.
We're morbid.
I know. I'm an architect. There won't be a tombstone. There will be a building, and it will be sublime. Okay?
Well, there's got to be something inscribed somewhere. Go for it.
She was great with natural light. How about that?
All righty, we'll take it. You're stuck on a deserted island. You can have your one favorite food forever. What is it?
That was also really hard because I love to eat. Same. But I decided it's sushi because you can dress sushi up or down in many different ways. There's very other foods that are quite so versatile.
You're on an island, so there's probably fish there. There's a survival aspect to this question too.
Hopefully they've got some rice and
some seaweed, some rice.
The seaweed's probably fine, but the rice.
All right. Last but not least, please recommend a book that's impacted you on a personal or professional level.
That's also a really hard one because I don't think any one book has shaped me, but lots of them have. But the one I read over and over and over again because it's mindless entertainment and it turns my brain off, which is important for my mental health, is The Lord of the Rings. I keep rereading that. I've read it like 10 times or more.
Wow. So, you're a fellow nerd.
Yeah. and I don't get me started on the movies.
You know what? I haven't watched them. I have not watched the movies. I've read the books. I read the books in high school. I love the books, but I haven't really gotten around to watching the movies. Are they worth it?
They are, but I'm like, they over dramatized a whole bunch of it that I'm like, the story is great. Why add more?
It's needed. Yeah, they needed to jazz it up for less than nerds.
But there's so much action in those books already. You didn't need to add more.
Okay, are you a Dune fan as well?
Yes, very much.
Did you see the new ones?
The new ones, but I think the second one was too short. I think they crammed in way too much in the second one. I love the first one.
It was brilliant, though. I love both of them. I think they were both brilliant. I do agree what you're saying. The pacing on the second one. There's 3 movies that they're getting that book into, so I guess they did have to cut some somewhere.
Yeah, I loved the first one. Yeah.
I love them both. Most people love the second one better than the first one because they say the first one's too slow, but I think the first one was more like loyal to the book. Right?
Yeah, okay, and the character development. That's what I really like. I love character development,
Yeah, they did take some liberties in the second one with some of the character. I won't want no spoilers, but there's some divergent paths a little bit there. All right, well, I could nerd out with you for a while, but in the interest of time, Gisela, please tell the audience listening where they can go to find out more about you and Gisela Schmoll Architect PC, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, it's very easy. You go www.gislaschmollarchitect.com. There I am.
All righty. Sounds good. Gisela, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
All right, guys, that is it for this episode. If you would like to get some more information about Gisela Schmoll, head on over to giselashmollarchitect.com. All of those links will be in the show notes at wingnutsocial.com. Don't forget, Wingnut Social is a digital marketing agency for the interior design space. We only work with interior design related industries, interior designers, architects, vendors to the trade, interior design coaches, anything that runs that gamut. We've been doing that since 2018, late 2017, but 2018, that's all we do. And we do it really, really well. Head on over to wingnutsocial.com, check out our services, hit that Let's Chat button, see how we can work together. And that is it. Remember, until next time, to get out there, get uncomfortable, and be great. Awesome. So, Gisela, I'm so sorry.
You're going to edit this, right?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah, we just remodeled our kitchen, and we did take out a load-bearing wall, and that's all I'll say about that. No, I apologize. It wasn't a load-bearing wall. So,
okay, then you're fine.
That's an edit. That's an edit. Today's guest, Gisela Schmoll, walks us through. But Gisela Schmoll is going to have a conversation, or she did, I should say,